Crop Talk on Market Journal is supported by Nebraska's soybean farmers and their checkoff. Let's turn back our attention back to soybean diseases and pathogens that deserve our attention as we approach the upcoming 2024 growing season. Making the right seed selection plays a pretty crucial role when mitigating potential damage caused by threats like soybean cyst nematode or phytophthora. We sat down with University of Nebraska-Lincoln plant pathologist Mangel to get some of his insights when it comes to the significance of seed selection as a strategy for disease control. Joining us on Crop Talk this week is Mangel from Nebraska Extension. Dylan, today, during these winter months, we're going to talk a little about soybean seed selection. A lot of different options out there. Perhaps some producers made their choices back in the fall, but now's a good time when you're in these winter months to really study this and look at what you should be doing on your farm. Your thoughts, big picture.
Yeah, so there's a lot of options out there. Talking to those local advisors, figuring out what's going to work best for you is very important. But, just as we start to analyze last field season and think about what happened and think about some options, it's really good to take a look back and consider variety selection and trying to find varieties that are going to work really well under the disease conditions that you dealt with in the past.
One of the things we want to break down today is the difference between resistance and field tolerance.
So there's two kinds of resistance when you think about a plant not being susceptible to a disease. The first kind is true resistance, which is dependent on a resistance gene. There's a couple different types of genes that you might see in the catalog that we'll get to, but the other kind is field tolerance. Those are the numbered scales, typically 1 through 9, rating how good this variety will do under a certain disease.
When it comes to some of the specific things that we have a chance to catch up with you during the growing season, we'll get a couple of them here, but I saw some news on the national level. Might have a breakthrough when it comes to soybean cyst nematode. That has been a challenging thing to deal with, but might have some breeding programs addressing that coming down the pipeline. Do I understand that right?
Yeah, so what happened in variety trials in the Midwest, in Iowa, they saw that varieties with the resistance gene peaking, as opposed to PI88788, the other resistance source for soybean cyst nematode, they're looking really good under SCN pressure. Now, it takes breeding programs a little bit of time to breed up these good backgrounds and get these resistance genes in there. So what we saw in those variety trials is that peaking is looking really good. Under SCN pressure, it's out yielding a lot of PI88788 varieties. So we're really recommending that growers try a peaking variety under your SCN fields with SCN pressure. And do that based off of testing. So again, I'll just mention the Nebraska Soybean Board funds a testing program for any Nebraska growers. If they have questions about that, they can reach out to the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. But start by testing, figure out where you've got that pressure, and try a peaking variety on those acres.
I understand there's an online profit tracker. It's the SCN Profit Checker, and you can enter some information there, help give you a little heads up going into the next growing season.
So scnprofitchecker.com. If you go there, you can put in some basic information about your field, and it can show you how much yield you're likely losing to SCN if you're using a PI88788 variety. Now, I still want to recommend using that source if you don't have other options, but try rotating that with newer sources as well as those come out, and try and make those tools last as long as possible for resistance.
A couple other concerns that soybean growers have had: phytophthora and white mold.
That's right. So another resistance gene situation is phytophthora. It showed up later than normal in 2023, but it did show up as soon as we got that first flush of moisture, or in those fields that were irrigated. Kind of the first time you turn on that pivot, it really wakes up those spores and they go and infect the plants then. So we did see it. If you had problems like that in fields and you think you might in other fields next year, consider a variety with a resistance gene to phytophthora. That'll go a long way, and those will be in the catalog called under RPS genes.
Okay. Finally, also want to bring up sudden death syndrome. It can be as scary as the name is out in the fields.
Yep, so the alternative to resistance sources are those disease ratings, and while there's not publicized resistance genes for sudden death syndrome, they do have good ratings for disease or for field tolerance to sudden death syndrome. And those are very meaningful specifically for that disease. So if you've got areas with a history of it, try and pair one of those this year, and that can really decrease the amount of yield you could lose to sudden death syndrome.
It's good to have kind of the big picture thoughts as you continue to study these issues for soybean producers year round. But for our local producers today, the local advisor is a pretty good resource for them, right?
That's right. If nothing else, try to figure out what problems you're having in those fields and take that to your local advisors and tell them, I've dealt with white mold in this field, or I've dealt with this. and ask them to help you find a product or a variety that's going to work good under those conditions for you.
Okay. What else do you want to share with us, Dylan?
If you're not sure what disease you're dealing with, reach out to the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. It's a great value just to figure out exactly what you're dealing with if you're going to make an investment on a management decision based off of that.